Today we'll take a listen to some creepy, disturbing stories found on Reddit. This first story is titled, "Had an incredibly frightening experience last night and wanted to know if anyone here has ever had a similar encounter." Posted on the Let's Not Meet subreddit by a Reddit user named Sharkserday. Let's begin. So last night, I was at a classmate's house working on a group project we have due tomorrow. I live in an apartment in the town where our university is located, and my classmate lives at his parents' house, which is in the foothills just outside of town. In order to get to the house, you have to drive along a relatively secluded and narrow two-lane road for about 5 to 6 miles. We started working on the project at about 6 p.m. and I ended up hanging around for a while after we had finished our working. So I left his house pretty late at about 11 and started down the road back towards town. I didn't realize how tough it would be to navigate the road at night. There were no streetlights and the road was unkept and riddled with potholes. On top of this, I had no cell service, so I had to drive very slowly to make sure I didn't blow out one of my tires since I had used my spare a couple of weeks back. I figure I was about 3 miles from the house when I rounded a tight corner and saw a pickup truck with a camper shell parked diagonally across the road. The manner in which it was parked completely impeded my path, and I couldn't drive around it because there was a gully on both sides of the road. The only way for me to go at this point was backward, where there was a pull-off that I could use to turn my car around. At first I couldn't see inside the cab, but when I turned on my high beams I saw that there was a man slouched over in the driver's seat, his head resting against the steering wheel as if he had been knocked out after a bad accident. I immediately sensed something was wrong. The way his car had just coincidentally come to rest in a position that totally blocked the road was a big red flag for me. I had heard stories of people playing dead in the road as a way to lure unsuspecting people out of their cars so they could rob them. I decided, "Fuck this shit," and elected to go back to my classmate's house and explain what was going on. I threw the car into reverse and kept my eyes darting back and forth between my rear view and the truck. I looked and saw that I was almost to the pull-off where I could turn around. When I looked back, my heart skipped about 5 beats. The man who had been slouched over in the driver's seat was now walking at my car at a hurried pace while a few other men jumped out of the camper shell and started moving towards me as well. I panicked and accelerated backwards into the pull-off, which messed up the undercarriage of my car pretty bad. As I put it into drive, the guy was already at my passenger side door tugging on the handle, which, thank the Lord, was locked. I only caught a brief glimpse of him, but his face appeared to be scabbed and leathery, definitely a meth head or some sort of drug abuser. I sped away and didn't slow down at all until I reached the house, constantly checking my rear view to see if they were following. Thankfully, they didn't tail me, and when I reached the house, I explained what had happened to my classmate and we called the cops. I was grateful that my buddy's parents were kind enough to let me stay the night. They didn't find anyone on the road matching the description, but I filed an incident report, and they told me they would be on the lookout for similar vehicles and suspicious activity. But holy shit, I'm still so shook up over it. I keep getting the same adrenaline rush I got when I saw the guy charging me whenever I think about it. This next story is posted by Reddit user Florianzer on the Let's Not Meet subreddit, titled, "My brother saw a ghost as a kid. 2 decades later, I realized what he actually saw. I was about 7 years old, my brother about 10. It was well past our bedtime when our mom woke up off the couch to put us to bed. Our dad worked construction out of town back then, so it was often just us 3 at the house for weeks at a time. Up the stairs and to the immediate right was our parents' bedroom. Going left put you in the middle of a hallway. Taking another left down that hallway led to my brother's room. The opposite end was my room, which was also across the hall from our upstairs bathroom. At either end of the hallway are window doors we always kept locked and rarely used. The door on my end led to a balcony overlooking our front yard, and the door on my brother's end opened to our back porch. The house kinda leans into a small hill. My brother and mom both had a habit of waking up in the middle of the night to use the bathroom. I only knew this because I was always a light sleeper and they just couldn't help flushing with the door wide open. This night, however, my brother stopped on his way to his room and came back towards the bathroom. He said, "I'm gonna try to pee before I go to bed. The past few nights I've been too afraid to walk to the bathroom." I keep seeing a man wearing stripes at the end of the hallway. I don't know if my mom wrote it off as my brother telling ghost stories to try to scare me, or if she was already half asleep and didn't catch it, but she didn't react at all to my brother's confession. I, on the other hand, was terrified by it. The fear of seeing a ghost like that at the end of the hallway or through the windows is the reason I started running from the stairs to my bedroom at night. Years later, when I was about 18, my mom and I were having a conversation in her car about a dog we had for a very short time when I was little. We were sharing stories about Max's tendency towards destroying my shoes and other unruly behaviors when my mom blurted out, "Do you remember that time I opened the front door for the cops and Max ran inside to the kitchen and started tearing open that big bag of dog food we had?" This really caught me by surprise, because in all the years I lived in that house we never once called the cops. I asked her what she was talking about and she looked equally surprised, as if she had just revealed something by accident. "Oh, that's right. I never told you because you were too young at the time. One night, I woke up hearing noises outside my window, and when I looked I saw a man staring into my bedroom." She went on to describe how turning on the lights caused him to take off running, and how she grabbed my dad's pistol before calling the cops. I can't remember all the details I gave them when they showed up. Tall white male wearing a striped shirt and jeans, short dark hair, something like that. They said it matched the description of a man they were looking for in the area. It turns out he had escaped from jail on a murder charge. Now, I know it sounds so obvious hearing those two stories back to back, but it wasn't until a few years ago, in my mid-20s, that I pieced together that my brother had unknowingly warned us about a murderer who spent multiple nights casing our home. This next story is titled, "I Think My Old Bedtime Story Has a More Sinister Meaning." It's posted on the Scary Stories subreddit by a Reddit user named Pudinator. Every night, my dad was in charge of putting me to bed. He would help me brush my teeth and then would tuck me into my nice, warm bed. Then he would tell me a story. Every night, it was the same story. The story of Bosco and Billy. I had lots of books in my room, as my mother would read to me throughout the day, but Dad would never read any of those books. He would always tell me the same story. I always assumed that either the story had come from a book, but my father had told it so many times that he didn't need to read from the book anymore, or that it was a story he was told as a child. I always enjoyed the story of Bosco and Billy. I always found that it would help me go to sleep. Usually, I would be almost asleep by the end of the story. I slowly learnt all of the words to the story and would sometimes recite it along with my dad. For some reason, probably because I heard it every night for years, the story stuck with me, and even to this day, I still remember all of the words to the story. The story in its entirety is as follows. Billy the bear was an ordinary bear with an ordinary life. But he had a small friend named Bosco who got him into strife. Most of the time Bosco would behave, but sometimes he acted out. Billy tried to keep him in line, but sometimes he would break out. Like, one time Bosco was hungry and decided he would steal food. Billy tried to stop him and explained to Bosco that stealing is rude. But Bosco didn't listen. He stole the food anyway, and took it to his secret spot and hid it away. Bosco took the food to the large oak tree that was in the woods. There he stuffed the food inside, and that's where he hid his goods. Billy never found the stolen food. It's still hidden there to this day. Bosco wishes that it is never found. He hopes, and he prays. Billy is kind and Bosco is a little bit silly. And that is the story of Bosco and Billy. Now, the story seems innocent enough, and I always thought it was a cute little story about two bears. But after recent events, I now know it is a lot more sinister than it first appears. My dad passed away a few years ago, and it took a toll on all of us, my mom especially. She began a little bit reclusive after my father passed, and so I didn't see her as often, because she shut herself off from others. I spent a long time trying to create a relationship with my mother again, and slowly, over the course of a couple of years, I did manage to reconnect with her. Things weren't as they once were, but she did invite me over once a week for a cup of coffee. During these hour-long visits, we would sit in the kitchen and talk about times gone by. About my childhood, about my time at school, and about all of the good times we had together. The one subject that didn't come up, however, was my father. I think the pain was still too raw for my mom to talk about him. On one of my weekly visits, though, I thought that I would try and mention my father, as I felt that it might do Mum some good to talk about him. I decided to mention the story that he would tell me every night. Do you remember that story Dad used to tell me before bed? The story of Billy and Bosco? I hesitantly asked, not knowing how Mum would react to the mention of her late husband. Mum looked up from her cup of coffee that she was drinking. She looked confused. Maybe because it was the first time he had been mentioned for a number of years, or maybe because she didn't know what I was talking about. No, I don't remember that story, she replied. You had a lot of books, so I can't remember all of them. I was a bit surprised by this. Dad told it to me every night, so I would have thought that she would remember it. I then went on to explain that it wasn't a book, it was a story that would recite without reading it off of a page because he knew it so well. I thought that your father would read you a different book each night, she said, sounding confused. That's what he always told me anyway. I thought that this was especially strange because he never read me one of my books, and I would have thought that my own mother would have known this. What was this story about? She asked me. It was about two bears, one named Billy and one named Bosco. I was about to continue explain the story when my mum suddenly interrupted me. Did you just say the bear was named Bosco? She asked me, sounding quite serious. Yeah, that's right. His name was Bosco, I replied. That's strange, Mum said. She had a look on her face that looked like she was trying to remember something. Your father used to tell me about a friend that he used to have named Bosco, Mum continued. He used to say that Bosco would get him in a lot of trouble when he was younger. I never met this Bosco, which your dad said was a good thing. He also said that he only met up with Bosco only once or twice after we met, and then your father told me that he was no longer going to see Bosco. He said that he finally got rid of him. I was always curious as to who he was. I have never seen any photos of him, or any evidence that he existed now that I think about it. So, it is strange that he told you a story that contained a character with the name Bosco. Mum stopped talking for a second and I didn't know how to respond. She then looked at me and asked, Do you remember this story? Can you tell it to me? I recited the entire story to her. She listened to the whole tale without changing her expression. She took it all in and then she asked, An oak tree? Are you sure that Bosco hid the food in an old oak tree in the woods? Yeah, it was definitely an old oak tree. Why's that? I asked her, sensing that something wasn't quite right. It's just that, on mine and your father's first date, he took me to an old oak tree that was inside the Shelton Woods, only a 10-minute drive from here, she responded. He told me then that it was lucky for me that Bosco hadn't decided to interrupt their date. She then stopped talking and stared at the wall behind where I was sitting. I think it is time for you to go now. I'm sorry, she told me, a hint of sadness in her voice. I thought that maybe it was for the best that I did leave. I got up and gave her a small hug, which she didn't even seem to notice. Then I collected my things and headed out the front door. I got into my car and begun to drive home. On the way home, however, the thought of the old oak tree and Bosco began to fill my head. I couldn't escape these thoughts. I didn't know what it all meant, if it meant anything at all. I don't know what compelled me, but I had to visit the Shelton Woods and find this oak tree. I turned my car around and headed in the direction of the woods. 15 minutes later, I found myself standing at the edge of the woods. I took a step forward and entered them. I didn't know exactly where this oak tree was, but I was determined to find it. I explored the woods for around 10 minutes before I saw it. Standing in front of me was a huge oak tree, its branches extending high up into the sky. I walked over to the base of the tree. A sense of fear started to overcome me. Something didn't feel right. Felt like something terrible had happened here. I looked down at the ground, at the base of the tree, and I saw that the dirt there looked slightly different than the rest of the dirt in the woods. I don't know why I did this, but I bent down and begun to dig in this dirt. The police say that if I hadn't started digging, then they probably never would have found them. There were 4 bodies in total, all young women around the age of 24. All of them had been dead for over 30 years. It was undeniable they were all murdered and buried under this tree. The DNA testing was also clear. My father was responsible for the killings. Somehow, he managed to keep all of this hidden for many years. He never told anyone. The only clues that he gave were through my bedtime story, which I think was his way of confessing. The only thing I am not sure of now is, who is Bosco? Maybe my father and Bosco are the same person, or maybe he really did have a friend with that name. I don't think we will ever know. I don't think I want to know. My name is Cynthia, and I've been a nurse for nearly a decade. I'm not someone who believes in the supernatural, ghosts, spirits, or any of that. I've worked in hospitals long enough to know how many odd stories float around among night shift nurses. Phantom patients in hallways, voices in empty rooms, equipment moving on its own. I always chalk them up to exhaustion, stress, or people's minds playing tricks on them when they're alone at night. That was me. Practical, grounded, and focused on the medical side of things. To make extra money, I started volunteering as a part-time caretaker for homebound patients. Mostly elderly people who needed a little extra help with medications or nighttime monitoring. I actually enjoyed it. These were people who reminded me of my own grandparents, and most of the time the jobs were simple. A lot of charting, medication timing, making sure the patient was comfortable. Easy shifts, and quiet enough that I could get some reading or paperwork done. One case, though, has never left me. It happened last year, and even now, when I'm alone at night, I catch myself thinking about it. I can still hear the sounds. I can still picture what I saw on my phone screen. It started on a Monday afternoon. I'd been assigned to a woman named Margaret, 58 years old, who suffered from severe dementia. According to her file, she hadn't been out of bed for over a year and a half. Her children were her main caretakers. But that week, one of them had to fly out of state and the other was scheduled for night shifts at work. They didn't want to leave their mother unattended at night, so they requested a nurse to stay over and manage her medications. That's where I came in. When I arrived, the daughter who worked nights greeted me. She walked me through everything. The schedule of medications, how to handle her mother's occasional fits of confusion, what to do if she tried to pull out her 4-line. She was detailed and careful, and I appreciated that. She also showed me to a spare bedroom where I could rest between rounds. Margaret was lying in bed when I first met her. Frail, thin, with cloudy eyes that darted past me like she was watching something I couldn't see. She didn't speak much, just murmurs and whispers under her breath. Her daughter told me that was normal, just part of her condition. That first night, Monday, was routine at first. I administered her evening medications, checked her vitals, repositioned her for comfort, and then went to the spare room. I set my phone alarm for the next dosage and lay down. Sometime later, maybe 30 minutes into my nap, I woke to the sound of heavy thumping. Not a random creak of the house, but deliberate footsteps, like someone was walking around. I remember thinking, maybe the daughter came home early. I got up, went through the hallway, checked the kitchen and living room. Nothing. The house was silent. I opened the door to Margaret's room. She was right there, asleep, motionless in her bed. I told myself houses make noises, especially older ones. But I had this crawling sensation under my skin, like I was being watched. I shook it off, went back to bed, and forced myself to sleep. Tuesday night was uneventful. Same routine, nothing strange. It almost convinced me Monday had just been my imagination. Wednesday night was different. After Margaret's meds, I went to my room and put on my headphones, listening to soft music to drown out the silence. I must have drifted off because I suddenly jolted awake. Even through my music, I heard it. Footsteps again. Slow, deliberate. I sat up, heart pounding, tugged off my headphones. My room door was cracked open, and I swear, through the gap, I saw a figure. A dark silhouette passing by, moving out of the room. My brain scrambled to explain it. I told myself it had to be a dream, one of those strange moments when your mind is half asleep and creates illusions. That was the only explanation I could live with. Thursday night, it happened again. Same routine, same footsteps, same shadow at my door. This time I sat upright in bed, wide awake. But when I rushed to the hallway, it was empty. Every door was shut. Margaret's room was quiet, her frail body still in bed. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe I was under too much stress. Maybe I was just exhausted and imagining things. Still, I couldn't shake how real it felt. By Friday night, I needed proof, either to confirm I was losing my mind or to finally explain what was happening. I set my phone up on the dresser across from my bed with the camera facing the door. I left the door wide open on purpose, hit record, and laid down. I must have fallen into a deep sleep, because the next thing I remember was being jolted awake by my door slamming shut. Hard. The sound was violent, echoing through the room. My whole body froze. I sat there in bed, staring at the closed door, my chest heaving. I had left it wide open. I knew I had. And then I remembered my phone. My hands were shaking as I grabbed it and stopped the recording. I rewound to around 1 a.m. and pressed play. What I saw made my blood run cold. The footage showed my open doorway, just like I'd left it. Around 1:12 a.m., movement flickered into the frame. It was Margaret, the woman who hadn't walked in a year and a half. She shuffled into view, hunched over, her arms twitching at her sides. Her steps were jerky, her body convulsing with each motion. Every crack of her bones echoed faintly through the audio. She was whispering, no, muttering something. The words didn't sound like English. They didn't even sound like words I recognized. More like a string of guttural syllables, almost chanting. She walked straight to my bed, and then she just stood there. For nearly an hour, she hovered at my bedside, staring down at me while I slept. Her face was slack, her head twitching slightly from side to side. The whole time, that low whisper never stopped. At exactly 2 a.m., she turned, walked out of the room, and with a sudden burst of force, slammed the door shut. That was the sound that had woken me. The video ended there. I sat frozen for what felt like forever, clutching my phone so tightly my knuckles went white. My rational brain couldn't process it. There was no medical explanation for what I had just seen. I forced myself to leave the room and check on her. She was in bed, perfectly still, breathing slow and steady, as if she'd never moved at all. I gave her the 3 a.m. meds with trembling hands and didn't close my eyes again until the sun came up. Saturday morning, when the daughter came home, I acted normal, smiled, gave her the usual update, pretended I'd slept fine. I didn't say a word about what had happened or show her the video. I couldn't. How could I explain something like that without sounding insane? When she asked if I could cover again next week, I told her no. I lied and said I'd been assigned to night shifts at the hospital. She thanked me anyway, and I left. I never went back to that house. To this day, I still think about Margaret, about whether what I saw was some bizarre neurological episode, or something I'll never be able to explain. I've continued working as a nurse, continued doing home visits. I've never experienced anything like that again, but I'll never forget the sound of those cracking bones, the low muttering in the dark, and the sight of her standing over me, watching, as if she knew I was dreaming and waiting for me to wake. Sometimes I wonder if she still walks at night, when no one's there to see her, and I still keep that video saved on an old phone in my drawer. I've never shown it to anyone, but every now and then, when I can't sleep, I play it back, just to remind myself it really happened. If you've made it to the end of this video, thank you. I appreciate you so much. If you find creepy, disturbing, or horror contents interesting, please do like and subscribe for more videos like this. With that being said, I'll see you guys in the next one.